Welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a deeply moving and brutally honest conversation from Chonda Pierce, the queen of clean comedy. But more importantly, a woman who has lived through the dark valleys and come out with a story worth telling. In one of her most vulnerable podcast moments, Chonda opens up about repressed depression, the aching loneliness that comes with life on the road, and how she's found a way to keep living, laughing, and loving, even while still walking with a limp. Let's break it down, because this isn't just about comedy, it's about the cost of it. It's about learning how to breathe again after you've forgotten how. Chonda starts by talking about something a lot of people miss. Depression doesn't always look like sadness. She said something powerful. I didn't even know I was depressed. I thought depression was crying all the time. But I was funny. I was performing. I was fine until I wasn't. Let that sink in. There are people making others laugh every day while silently breaking. And for Chonda, that moment came like a crash. After years of putting on a brave face, her world fell apart. Then she opens up about the loneliness of the road. Performing night after night, city after city, being surrounded by crowds, but feeling completely alone. She said, "It's the strangest thing to make thousands of people laugh and then cry yourself to sleep in a hotel room that doesn't even feel like yours." That kind of loneliness isn't just physical, it's soul deep. It's what happens when your platform grows, but your personal world shrinks.
And you mentioned losing two sisters, and also we talked about the loneliness, depression, and anxiety. Is that what it was that we talked about? Or at least mentioned. So do you remember your sisters at all, or what was that?
Oh,
What area of...
It's interesting that, and you know this, Ann, there are particular anniversaries that come along. The anniversary of a birth, of a loved one that's deceased, the anniversary of their death, and how it happened, the anniversary of, and so there are, and we call those triggers. There are sometimes triggers that come along, and I will spend the day really remembering them and loving the thoughts of them and who they were. I was 16 when my big sister was killed in a car wreck, and I was 18 when my little sister died with leukemia. And at that particular age, it's difficult enough to process that as an adult. But as a teenager, I think it's why it took me well into my married years to really begin to process that death, because you're just not capable physically or mentally as a teenager. And so the way you deal with those things is very primal. You're angry, or you're frustrated, or you're mad at God for a long time. You want nothing to do with God. And I went through all those emotions as a teenager. I guess it was the distraction of great love that came into my life that began a healing process. And that was meeting my husband and my high school sweetheart. And we at last married. And so then life just gets busy. And I always tell people, there's a lot to unpack in my past. I had a bad relationship with my father. He was on many terms abusive, somewhat physically, yes. And then I had my understanding of sexuality really marred by his behavior. And so all that to say, it was a long time unpacking that. And I always tell folks, if you do not process well, your body will do it for you.
Well, wow.
And so it will manifest itself either in overeating. It'll manifest itself in addiction. It'll manifest itself in great depression. And you can't figure out why you're depressed. Everything seems to be happy. It could be that back in the back there of your mind is some processing that needs to happen that you've not yet dealt with. And so as an adult, well into my career, I hit the wall running. And a lot of it was overwork and really tired. A lot of it was the stress and strain. But God used all those things to wake me up. Even my own stupidity of working too much and being too driven, God used those things to wake me up. And I wound up deeply, darkly depressed. And I was placed in a psychiatric hospital. I didn't want to go, but my whole, it's like the whole family shows up and goes, "You got to get some help." And I went, and I began a journey of unpacking a lot of pain that I had just probably stuffed and used comedy to put a Band-Aid, put a Band-Aid, but never really dealt with the sore. And I began to do that. And it was a long process journey. It doesn't happen overnight. I was willing to go to a counseling place where I checked in for, about 12 days and dealt with my depression, started taking the layers off of some great pain. But once you do that, it begins to heal. Once you let that, it sounds gross, but once you let that, the infection of the pus, and it's terrible, but once you clean that sore out, it begins to heal in such a beautiful way. And don't be afraid of the scar. The scar is a triumphal tattoo of what God has done in your life and the victory that he's brought. Not everybody's going to like it. Not everybody's going to be on the same page. I have loved ones to this day who don't really believe me, who don't really, see the pain or the scar. They'll like, oh, get over it. Or, I have, you should move on. Why do you still talk about it? And I always go, I talk about it because God has brought me such victory. Someone needs to hear you can be victorious too.
She talked about how it wore her down, not all at once, but slowly, quietly, until she had to face the truth. Something inside her needed healing. What makes Chonda's story so relatable is that she doesn't pretend it's all fixed now. She still struggles, but what's changed is how she handles the pain. She sought counseling. She got real help, not just spiritual talk, but practical steps. And she began to realize that healing isn't about being perfect, it's about being honest. She shared this. I thought my brokenness disqualified me, but it turns out it's the only reason I can truly connect with people. Isn't that beautiful? It's not the polished parts of us that God uses. It's the cracks, the honest, open wounds that allow others to breathe and say, me too. Here's where it gets really powerful. Chonda realized that her greatest ministry wasn't just her comedy. It was her testimony, her willingness to talk about grief, depression, loneliness, and even the parts of her life that still feel tender. God doesn't need you to be fixed, she said. He just needs you to be willing. And that's the core of her message. You don't have to be healed to be helpful. You just have to be honest. She uses her brokenness as a platform, not to gain sympathy, but to give others hope. And let me tell you, that kind of raw faith, it's rare and it's real. If you're feeling broken, if you're secretly struggling with depression, anxiety, or deep loneliness, this is for you. You're not disqualified. You're not forgotten. And your broken pieces, they might just be the very thing God wants to use to reach someone else. Chonda's story reminds us that there's healing in honesty, that laughter and sadness can coexist, and that the road to wholeness isn't straight, but it is possible. Let me know in the comments what part of her story spoke to you most. And if you're walking a hard road right now, just know you're not walking alone. Hit like, share this with someone who needs it, and don't forget to subscribe for more faith-filled, real-life commentary. Until next time, stay honest, stay hopeful, and keep going.